Everyone. We are on Friday, or not Friday, I'm wishing it's Friday, May 9th. We got the full set release for Ursula's Return last night. I've not been able to find a website that's perfectly, that has everything perfectly listed. So when I go through these images here, kind of rating each card by card, there's going to be a little bit of background where you'll see some kind of behind the scenes work of me just pulling them up each manually for each thing. But we have our general rating scale. Yeah, our rating scale here, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 stars. I'll audibly give them, half stars as well. A scale of 10 is probably, a better, more accurate rating scale to determine a card's playability, but stars are nice. So we're going to do with 5 stars and listen for half stars. But yeah, let's start off here with Augustin Madrigal, first set in the card list. Won't cost 2/2s are fine. Typically, these things are placated by what they can shift into for being playable. So this one's kind of just getting a medium 2-star rating. It's not a surfer stitch, or it's not a stitch chain enabler. It's not a queen enabler. There's no other key to something to shift onto it. So it's just a 1-cost 2/2. It's fine. We're seeing a lot of these over the course of the game, and it's just pretty medium and nice looking card. Like the movie, a lot of the magical cards are really well suited for the character's talents, which is kind of nice, which I like. But moving right along, we have Alma Madrigal. Not all the cards are going to be English, just because, again, we are on the eve of the release, and a lot of the websites haven't had them fully updated. But when this character does read when you play it, you need to search your deck for any Madrigal and put it on top of your deck, shuffle everything else but the top card, of course. It's fine. It's one of the first instances we have of being able to search your deck for a specific card. And we've had ways to kind of find pieces together, like Ariel, look at the top 4, be our guest, stuff like that before. This is the first one that kind of prompts a shuffle. The only other card in the game I think that shuffles is Chernabog, which is a big dramatic effect and kind of cool. But this one, breaking a little bit of the barrier with what the game has kind of allowed us to do so far. Shuffling isn't really a benefit in a lot of cases. It can be when you put cards to the bottom with cards like Develop Your Brain or something like that, and you want to get them back. But it can also be a downside because you put something bad to the bottom, you want it to stay to the bottom. But the ability to search for any character is highly contingent on what the rest of them do. I don't believe we've seen too many that are incredibly powerful, but there are some synergies there with some of the other Madrigals that either look at the top card of your deck or benefit from having more in play. So fine card. This one's probably also going to get a 2-star rating there, just because it doesn't have too many powerful things going on. It's uninkable. Uninkable is a big drawback with a lot of these things, but fun card. I do like the flavor of this, kind of bringing the family together. That's really, I guess, the flavor hit there. And when I say flavor, I mean kind of feeling the character of the through the card. And when you feel what they're doing and it represents very well through the abilities, it's really cool. Moving right along, next up we have Ariel, Singing Mermaid. So as opposed to Ariel Voiceless from set 1, which is a 4-cost 3/4 that couldn't sing, we have a 4-cost 3/4 with Singer 7. Singer 7, when we first saw this, we hadn't seen some of the larger songs that sing together. So this didn't really have much of a home aside from singing Be Prepared. I think I saw a bunch of memes that were, what's your purpose to sing Be Prepared? And then it's like, oh my gosh. This card's fine. We've seen a lot of cards that have the 3 strength problem here of kind of being susceptible to Medusa, and that is a big problem with a lot of cards. Medusa is a very good check for the game, and I know people are going to say, there's only so many Medusas they can play, and that's true. But in decks like Ruby Amethyst, there's ways to recur it with the Mims, and this card will be fine in a lot of decks. Some of the songs are very powerful and worth playing out, but I'm having a hard time imagining investing 4 ink into this card and it really paying off when you can potentially play cheaper characters such as the set 2 Cinderella, the 1-cost one that sings for 3, as well as some other singers from other sets, maybe it's the Sebastian or things like that sing for 4 that cost 2. Those are what I see are going to piece together those big songs more so than something like this. This is kind of big and splashy, and I like it, but not really too enthused by it. Probably going to give it 2 stars. It's the dream is there, and being able to sing Just Be Prepared off of it can be a huge tempo swing. One of the most dangerous things that Ruby Sapphire can do, and is you use a Scar or Automato to sing Be Prepared, then develop a board as well. Because normally Be Prepared is a card that kind of resets the board and gives your opponent the initiative back. But this one can, when you can sing Be Prepared, you can develop ahead, so kind of pull ahead even casting Be Prepared. But we'll see what kind of develops. There's a lot of song support in this set, and maybe a new kind of deck can emerge from singers like this. So TBD, but we'll see. One of the characters there that does sing quite well is Singer 9, legend that buffs your princesses by 1 lore when it sings. Kind of alludes to playing a princess-themed deck, as well as one with heavy songs. This one, again, a lot of these cool build-arounds that require a bunch of characters in play are kind of going to fall prey to a lot of what the more efficient decks in the more competitive metagame are going to be playing, whether it be basically anything Ruby is going to be kind of eating cards like this up, cards that are kind of big, kinds that, in cost, I should say, cards that don't dodge some of the key removal that your opponents can play. Like this doesn't have any kind of defense against Maui or Medusa, and also requires other characters to be in play to get its full benefit, so it's a bit vulnerable to cards like Be Prepared. So I don't want to sound like a broken record through this review, because there are a lot of cards that are going to fall into this category. It's a really cool build around. Singer 9 doesn't really hit any key songs. Some of them I think are either 8 or 10 or 7 or 6, so there's no specific song to pair with this yet. There could be more in the future. And as far as princesses go, I like that this is a buff for princesses. It's kind of cool there. It's also a hero, which does matter a bit in the set, so with some of the princesses being heroes and being a sub-hero theme in Sapphire. But overall, I think this card's going to fall a little bit short just because of its vulnerability in competitive play. I'd probably give this as well a 2-star rating. It's not quite there. Even cards like Brawl, which we're going to get to in a little bit, help deal with characters like this, where otherwise they could hope to survive in the early games if you push this out quickly. So not the best card, especially at Legendary. Kind of a little disappointed in the Legendary, but we'll see how it plays out. And Cogsworth. So we have a new Cogsworth. Image isn't perfect, do apologize. 4 cost 3/3. When it quests, you give a character -2 until the start of your next turn. This card's actually kind of interesting. I imagine this is going to be relegated mostly to limited play. But being able to shrink a character and kind of defend against an attack is pretty interesting. It might be costed a little bit too highly for pure competitive play. But there are definitely going to be scenarios where you want to protect against something that your opponent has in play, and this helps kind of give pseudo resist to your characters against one threat. So cute. Also probably going to get a 2-star. I'm not trying to just do 2 stars, but nothing's really exciting here so far. We've gone through a couple cards which I think are just falling short of anything that really is going to push through to play. But there are plenty of cards which will. Amber, I think, in this set got the short end of the stick as far as cards. It's probably my maybe 1 or 2 cards stand out, which we'll get to, but Amber's one of the weaker cards, I'd say, in this, or colors in this set, if not the weakest. We have Daisy Duck. 1 cost 1/3. This set completes the fact that now all colors do have 1 cost 1/3s in the game. We're also going to give this 2 stars. It's not something Amber's desperately needing. It's been able to play either Ruby or Steel or something to pair with Amber, which basically Ruby and Steel have been the standouts so far in color pairs. As far as I know, I don't believe there's anything that shifts onto this. To have that lineup potentially, but it's a fine card. It's kind of cool that we have access to it in this color pair. Maybe a deck that didn't want to play Minnie Mouse but wants to play Teeth and Ambitions, this card can kind of work well with. But yeah, I'm kind of glad we have. Initially, when we first started playing the game, I was kind of unhappy that all the colors were getting kind of the same stat line for characters. But I think if they're meaningfully expressed in what they can potentially shift into, it's kind of cool. But for now, we're just kind of getting them to get them in. I'm okay with that because they're not too impactful. Set 1, all the 2/2s for 1 were pretty impactful. In set 2, they were relatively as well. But as the game goes on, they're kind of just being outclassed, and they're kind of just characters they want to get into the game, I'd imagine, and don't want them to be too not everything has to be a home run. Some can just exist. So fine card, not thrilled, but it's okay. Now every color does once we get to their Sapphire one. coming right up here, another Daisy Duck, Musketeer Spy. This one's interesting. So a lot of decks recently have been playing cards like Friar Tuck, a lot of the Emerald decks, which is conditional. Your opponent discards a card if whoever has the most cards in hand does. This one's kind of unconditional. It just always makes your opponent discard a card. The difference in trade-off you get from Friar Tuck to a card like this is you lose a lore and a point of willpower, which is a pretty big deal. The lore is one of the reasons that you can play it in decks like Emerald Steel. Just questing for 2 is the biggest gap in the game is between 1 and 2 always, whether it be cost, lore, strength, anything like that, just because percentage-wise you're doubling the amount you'd have when you go from 1 to 2, and every increment after that is a lower than 50% increase or 100% increase. So this card's fine. I think it will see play. I'm actually giving this 3 stars. Pretty good in limited, I would imagine. I haven't actually played any limited in this game. I'd like to. It's just hard to kind of get people together to want to draft, because I feel like the draft format still needs a little bit of work with how the colors work out. Maybe if you can only play 4 of the 6 factions to kind of have a little bit of people not just picking the best cards every time, but maybe having them have to choose some kind of color identity. One of the interesting thing is, how do you want to construct your deck? And I think that the freedom to just play whatever is a little bit too much and makes it less, the draft itself less interesting. The gameplay is probably fun, but the draft itself is probably less interesting because you can just play whatever at any point in time. But who knows? Art's pretty cool. I like the character, and there's a potential it sees play. I've played worse cards, and in set 1 I would love this thing. It's half of a You Have Forgotten Me, which half is half, but it's fine. Let's move right along here. Donald Duck, Musketeer Soldier. So it is a Musketeer for the Musketeer synergies here. Bodyguard. It's basically the same stats as a set 1 Simba, which 3 costs for a 2/3 Bodyguard is much worse than a 2 cost 2/3 Bodyguard. But when you play this, the chosen character gets +1 lore this turn. So functionally, this just gains the lore when you play it if you're playing on questing anyway. There will be situations where you cannot quest immediately. And this is worse than a Simba, but it could have some value there. Having the ability to go +1 lore without going down a card. When I say going down a card, typically shifting should be viewed as going down a card because you're losing the base of whatever card it was underneath of it when you shift characters. So in general, shifting is card disadvantage, and that's why we see decks like Amber Steel play the shift line, because they have cards like Hole in the World that really take advantage of the fact that you don't really care that you went down a card. You gained a lot of momentum that way. But this card's fine. I'm not certain I'd see a home. It is kind of cool to have more cards that can generate more lore kind of out of nowhere. Giving some decks reach is definitely going to influence how a lot of the control decks do play. Kind of not, just being able to be very greedy with how they want to hold their removal against certain decks and kind of have your opponent overcommit into it, be prepared, because they know that there's no way for them to incidentally gain a bunch of lore or additional lore from a board state is pretty relevant. So I'm going to give this one 3 stars. It's not amazing, but it has potential, and I could see this seeing play in decks that are trying to be aggressive and just want to get extra lore. And if there's any character that can ready itself in a capacity and use this effect to gain more than 1 lore out of it, the 6 cost Beast from set 2 is a character that can ready itself in quest multiple times. And there's 1 or 2 other ones, maybe a yellow-blue items deck that uses the set 1 Ariel to kind of untap, and when you play items, this maybe can go in there as a way to get more lore on that character outside of the eye that the item that gives it itself. But potential, not fantastic, but potentially okay. That's where we go with this one. Felix Madrigal, kind of vanilla 2/4, 2 lore. This hasn't really been playable. We saw this in set 2 and 3, I think, in different variations. Cool card. I mean, I like all the Madrigal cards. Really great movie. Not exciting. 2 stars, potentially fine and limited. It's not a 1 star because it's not completely terrible. And some of the Madrigal synergies might play out in a way that this is okay. So, yeah. Let's go here. Gaston, Despicable Dealer. So there's only a few cards that I'm really interested in Amber in this set. Unfortunately, there's not too many that I think will be great, but this is probably one of them that I'm definitely going to experiment with when we get the chance to. So in functionally, this is a dock. This is kind of like a dock, which, the 3 cost 2/3 that quest for 2, that when you quest with it, you you get to make your next character cost 1 less. So that's like a single lantern effect. Let's call it a lantern. This is a double lantern effect. So there's a bunch of key differences between those 2 cards. And which one is correct, I'm still not certain, but there are upsides to both. Whether or not you play both of them or one or the other is unclear. So the biggest downside, let's just start off the bat. This one's uninkable, right? Uninkable is a really tough line to cross. Just because of how the game's played out, you really need to think of your uninkable cards in decks that don't have Fishbone Quill and a bunch of acceleration, like the Ruby Sapphire decks, as kind of power points in your deck, and you really need to utilize them in sparing ways. Some key differences. This one, upside wise, has a 4th point of health, which can definitely matter against Mim Snakes and other 3-cost characters like Rafiki. Still gets hit by Fox in the same way that Doc does. That's a wash there. And while the Doc gets to get 2 lore while it's using its effect, and that's a huge upside, you get to use the effect to reduce character cost and have 2 lore. This one you have to choose between 2 lore and getting the effect of cost reduction. There are benefits and downsides to both. There is an uptick, I would say, in the playability of a card like Lyle, which gives Reckless, and that card invalidates Doc in a lot of ways. It lets them kind of shut you off from using acceleration for turn because that one needs to quest. This one does not need that. This can quest, or this can use its effect through a reckless effect and still get the cost reduction. And of course, 2 is a significant, again, as I was saying, from 1 to 2, that's the same thing here. Between Doc and this is a more powerful effect. And when your kind of game plan is just to get to your late game characters, and a play pattern I'm relatively worried about if this type of, let's just say, Amber Ruby deck becomes popular, is you both are playing Gaston. Well, the person who goes first can, on their turn 4 after playing this, use this effect, play an Ink, and then play a Medusa to kill the opposing Gaston. So that's a play pattern which heavily is incentivized by going first or second. A little bit awkward, may or may not be part of the metagame, I'm not certain. But it's definitely one that is to kind of keep an eye on, and an interaction that if you're playing that type of thing, pretty important to know. I'm going to give this one, it's tough because not gaining lore, not being inkable. This one I think is a 4-star. It's very close to being really, really good. If I could give it a 3.5, we'll do that. We'll do this as our 3.5. So this is in between there. I'd say this is a 3.5-star card. It's right there. It could be very, very powerful. We really need to play out the format to see how it works. But between this and Doc, it's a hard call to know what's right, or to play both potentially, because Doc is pretty important. And if you're wanting to not play Lanterns, then I think you'd want to play both Doc and Gaston in some capacity. It may not be 4 of Gaston, 4 Doc, maybe 3 and 3. Maybe you want to play more Docs and then 3 Gastons. I'm not certain, but it's a powerful card. Give it right in the middle there, 3.5 stars. So we'll do the 2 stars up there, the 3 and the 4 to indicate 3.5. But yeah, very excited to see this one, how it plays out. Next we have the Golden Harp, Enchanter of the Land. I'm not thrilled with this character. So it's a 1-cost, 1/4 inkable 2 lore character. So, if you ignore this text line here, it's fantastic. But you have to banish her if you don't play a song, which means you can't play this on turn 1. You're unlikely to play it on turn 2, just because there are not too many 1-cost songs, and you're kind of giving up a lot of potential board presence by doing that type of play. But it is kind of cool that this exists. And later in the game, I don't hate this card maybe being played in some type of, let's just say Flute's variant of Steel Song as like a mid-game threat that you kind of play after wheeling, and then, you wield so you don't have to worry about it dying that turn, and you can just continuously sing after the turn after that. There's a chance it sees play. I'm not super excited by it. I'm thinking it's a little bit of a trap to try and make work, and it's definitely susceptible to cards like Bare Necessities taking cards out of your opponent's hand, and Ursula to also take cards. I'm giving this one, again, we're going to get into the half ratings here, 2.5. It could be fine. The potential upside is, I don't think, very high. If this was 3 lore, maybe. But having to conditionally, and it might be too good at 3 lore, but it might be just playable enough to play in some capacity, being inkable, that it's worth playing. But I'm skeptical at best about how we're doing this here, so not too certain. interesting card. I like the space that they're exploring. It does feel pretty horrible when you have to banish it, or against someone who just forgets if they played a song or not, and just plays it out, in an event, and it just dies immediately. That's whoops, but hey, it's fine. Next up, we have Goofy. Uninkable, 3/4. All right. When you play a character with bodyguard, ready this character, he can't quest. I'm not too excited by this one. This one's getting a nice 2-star there. The uninkable part is really rough for a character with such kind of low stats, I'd say. He can continuously kind of, not be challenged by anything, but it's kind of odd that you want to play bodyguards, which typically protect rested characters, but this readies itself, so you don't really need the bodyguard. Obviously, you don't have to play a bodyguard exerted, but and you still get this effect, but still it's kind of awkward how it kind of lines up, I feel. The card is not great, 2 stars. It's uninkable. Maybe if it was, even if it was inkable, I'm not too excited by this card. It could be okay, but it's not my cup of tea. We haven't seen enough incentive to play a bunch of bodyguards and musketeers yet. There's a couple cards which are kind of cool, but not enough for my liking. Maybe in a couple sets. All right, next up, Julieta Madrigal. So mini Ursula, right? So this is what was initially called kind of a budget Ursula, or not Ursula, Rapunzel. I'm getting those two confused. When you play a character, remove 2 damage from a chosen character. If you remove any damage this way, draw a card. So it's kind of like a mini Rapunzel. It definitely makes cards like Mother Gothel more threatening to play on turn 2. Sometimes you want to hold until you have the ability to deploy 6 inks worth of characters to immediately play Gothel into Rapunzel to get that guaranteed draw. This one is kind of exacerbate that. There's a couple more self-damaging cards which we'll get to, which I'm very excited for. But I think this card is incredible. Anything that replaces itself and helps you in combat is pretty awesome. And a lot of the cards definitely have that benefit. And this also has no restriction on who you heal to get that bonus effect. So there are some situations where your opponent value kind of traded into one of your characters, and you have an untapped something that can just eat theirs. You can potentially, heal up beforehand to draw if you want to keep one of your characters damaged, but definitely being able to remove damage from your opponent's characters is kind of cool. And you still get the card draw. So this card's solid. I'm giving this one a 4 stars. I think this is going to see a lot of play, even to complement Rapunzel, especially in Ruby Amber. This is probably, for me, the best Amber card in the set. And that's saying something, because it's an uncommon and it's not particularly flashy, but it's probably the best one for a competitive play in my mind. I wish we gotten a little bit more, but hey, we're here and I'm excited for it. So, all right, next up we have Max, Loyal Sheepdog. I like that he's a sheepdog. If you have a character named Prince Eric, it costs 1 less to play this. This is a 2-star limited card, not really something I'd be excited about for constructed. I can't think if there's an Eric that cost 1 to make this a turn 2 play. If I'm wrong in that, that's on me. But I don't think there's any way to make this cost 2 yet. Maybe we'll get to that spoiler, and I don't remember that's an Eric in play. But it's not great. I'm not too excited by it. Kind of vanilla character. If there is a 1-cost Eric, maybe. If that card's playable enough and there's a reason to play it, then you have this out in the deck, and it's 2 cost 4/3 is pretty big, but 3 willpower on things that costs kind of 3 or more is getting to a little bit to the point where you need to have an enters play effect to really be viable in this metagame, just because of how hostile the format is to characters. Dodgers Medusa, so it's good there, but it's not too exciting right now. All right, next up, Mickey, leader of the band. So as support, and when you play this character, chosen character gets support. Limited card, 2 stars, not something that'll see constructive play. There's a bunch of cards that do that add support a lot better than this one does. The stat line's kind of interesting, a 2/5. We haven't seen too much of that. There's basically the Cinderella from set 1 that has the same stat line. And the one thing with support I don't really like is that it never adds to the total number of strength that you have in play, really. it just kind of puts them all together onto one. So the fact that it never really gives you any kind of bonus stats to the board is kind of rough. I kind of wish there was some mechanic that lets you more cards along the line of queen, 5-cost queen that gives more strength to the board. I guess that one doesn't really give more either, but some way to increase stats would be nice. And support doesn't. It feels like a mechanic that's kind of missing in a lot of ways. And fine card for limited play, but not something I'm excited about in constructed really. Next up, all right, we have the captain himself, Mickey Mouse. So uninkable 7 costs 3/6 bodyguard support. Okay, when you play this character, if you shifted him into play, you may draw a card for each character with bodyguard in play. So I'm not buying into this card here. There's so many contingencies with it. Let's start with it being uninkable at 7, which there are cards that are uninkable and that are costing 7 that you can be fine with. But the biggest part for me is it only gets the card draw effect if you shifted it into play. So you can't just, late game, nothing in play, they just got rid of all your characters, play this for 7 and get a card out of it. I feel like for an uninkable 7-cost character, that's pretty vulnerable in a lot of ways. That doesn't really have too much of an effect when it's in play, except for being a bodyguard and supporting, which the stat line isn't great for either of those things, honestly. You should get a little bit, maybe. So I'm not. I mean, this is a build around 2-star, not great legendary character. It doesn't feel legendary to me. It just feels like a bunch of abilities on a card, and none of them really good. Maybe if it was inkable, you feel different about it, but it's just so much to ask you to do. And yes, you can certainly, in a best case scenario, play this and maybe draw four cards. Let's just say you can do that, and if you shift it down, awesome. That'll feel really good, but it's still not a very great body, and you're taking a pretty high risk, I would say, in Amber specifically, competing with cards like Carefree Surfer, Stitch, just to really have an effective card draw. Because Stitch, you can just have played it for 7 if you have 2 characters, great. But what if you just don't have a Mickey Mouse in play, but you have a bunch of bodyguarded characters? You don't get the draw, and that's just a little bit asking too much for me to really care. And it's not a 1-star card because it can be powerful, but it's not something I'm looking forward to trying out, really. I will let the Musketeer crew cook me with it and cook for me on that one. But here's a different bodyguard. So also uninkable, 1/5. The stats on these Amber characters are a little bit odd. Bodyguard, which, okay, 1/5 bodyguard's not great, but it has, when you play this character, banish something with 5 or more strength. Interesting. We have World's Greatest Criminal Mind, so this is essentially a World's Greatest Criminal Mind on a stick. The stick is fine. 5, it competes with a lot of things, but it kind of goes really well into a Mufasa variant of if it's not a character, you can kind of put it to play, and you don't really want to have too many actions in your Mufasa deck, so giving you an action-like effect is pretty strong. The one thing that's kind of an issue with an effect like this is it's very conditional. There's not too much room for this to be kind of blank against your opponent's deck. With World's Greatest Criminal Mind, you can always ink it. And if you're playing a matchup where, let's just say they have no characters that this will hit, and that's definitely the case with a lot of decks in this game. Even some of the Amber Steel decks that maybe aren't playing Cinderella, or if they just don't draw it, don't have any targets. And the only kind of real targets I can think of that you're guaranteed to hit against is Ruby Sapphire, where they have Tamatoa, Scar, Maui, and Maleficent Dragon. But all those cards kind of gain value immediately when played. So you're really only kind of catching up with this card in a bad situation, and you have to have it at the right time to be relevant, because their deck can do other things where this just might be stuck as an uninkable. If this was inkable, I'd love it. Uninkable, it's not particularly great. I'm still going to give it about 3 stars because the effect can be powerful, but it's not something I'm thrilled to really go into all my decks right off the bat with, unless the metagame's highly developed around being able to kill big characters. And yes, you can buff your opponent's characters with cards like Queen, but I think World's Greatest Criminal Mind has kind of proven that doesn't happen as often as we might like it to. It does require 2 characters to be in play for its effect, but it's fine. It's not amazing, but it might see some play depending on the metagame adjustments. Let's go on. Mirabel. Support. When this character quests, your other Madrigals get +1 lore this turn. So another kind of another kind of Madrigal there that definitely plays into the theme of all of them wanting to be in play as kind of a family, all together. it really, having this many uninkables at the higher cost there, I think we saw the Grandma Madrigal is a bit uninkable as well. And this one maybe is a target that you can choose for that effect to not to play too many of them, but still have access to this. It's fine. Its stat line's a little bit weak. It gets Medusa, but it's not fantastic. But it could be playable. I'm hesitant to say it's bad, but I'm also not terribly excited to give this a try unless there's some cards we're thinking of. Some of the cards we'll get to in Amethyst, really value having certain cards on top of your deck. And it's not great. This one's going to get in the middle there, a 2.5 star. It's how many unequals can you put in your deck, really? And how many, board states can you make go this wide that aren't going to be removed? Or it certainly is a type of card that if everything's going right and your opponent's not, trying to control your board too much, may look great. The bonus to all your Madrigals lore count-wise is pretty awesome. Some of the Madrigals don't really play too well with getting a bunch of characters to play, but that's kind of on theme for what they do, so we'll see. I'm willing to be proven wrong here, but I'm not thrilled by it. Again, being uninkable is a really rough sell. Another Mirabel, just 2/2 support, fine. 2-star, we've seen this effect on this stat line before. I think in one of the ducks, I think it's like a 2-cost 2/2 that supports and has other text too, but not great. Fine for limited, moving kind of on with that one. Not really spending too much time on that one, but let's move along here. Pluto, I don't remember. I think this one is, I just get rid of the logo there. 5-cost 4/5. When it enters, you heal for 3. You remove 3 damage counters, so it's kind of like a Rapunzel, but it's a reasonable body. Not thrilled to play with it. Maybe if you're having a heavy heal-based deck, sure, but 2 stars, it's pretty whatever. I almost prefer Maximus, the thing that has Bodyguard and support from set 1. You lose the lore on that exchange, but Bodyguard is pretty big, and the support is not nothing on that one, but it's not to get excited for. It's a fine limited card, not thrilled. Next up, Prince Eric Bodyguard, so a Hercules. Like a set 1 Hercules, but Prince Eric has some potential with the Shift Eric, which we'll get to next. We've seen this kind of be okay. It being a prince is relevant for Pride lands, just like Hercules is. So maybe there's a critical mass of those types of things, and maybe you'll have to play Steel to get as many princes in your deck for Pride lands, but not thrilled. Never really been where you want to be with those type of effects. Just going to be 2 stars. And kind of the Shift Eric we were talking about here. Kind of looks brainwashed because he kind of is by Ursula. So Shift 4. So you can shift on top. It's a 6-cost 5/5, 2 lore. Not the worst stat line. We've seen worse and played it. When you have a character named Ursula, it gets Bodyguard and +2 willpower, so potentially a 5/7. Pretty big. I mean, that's not nothing. It's 5/7, definitely survives the Maui test, and it's not big enough to get Medusa. The Ursulas that you'd have in play might be the concerning part of it. And Bodyguard isn't the strongest ability overall. It's fine. But this one's fine. I'm going to give this one 2, mostly a limited card that can pair really well if you happen to draft some of the Ursulas, but it's not nothing. It's just not exciting. One of my favorite cards from this set, probably going to be in the 2.5 star rating, only because its shift targets are great. We've never really seen a 2/3 for 2 that is just a shift target be playable, but Stitch is, one of the ones where Rockstar is a very powerful card that has fallen out of favor, mainly because of Medusa. Let's just stop saying that right there, but it is. But it's a fine card. It's not exciting in the limited format. It's not going to really exist, but it's cute, so that's why it's getting a 0.5 star. And next up, we actually have some of those Ursulas. Ursula, Eric's bride. So shift, discard a song. So it's a pretty quick way to get into play and immediately quest with it, and it plays pretty well with the other 2-cost Ursula from set 3, which you can take a song from your opponent's hand. When this quest, they get rid of a non-character card of your choice. So kind of like a bare necessities. You get to, whenever this quest, you get to bare necessities your opponent's hand, and it can be played on top of a card that can take a song by discarding a song or just playing this for 4. I definitely think this one has potential. It's a little weak on the stats. Uninkable does hurt it. The effect can be powerful. I'm not certain that the shift is going to happen too often. Discarding a card to kind of take a card out of their hand can be Sometimes worth it, sometimes not, depending on what the card is. Let's say you take a Be Prepared, then yeah, it's probably worth discarding a song from your hand to play this on top of an Ursula that's already in play and quest with it. But this card's fine also for 4. I mean, there's not too many Amber cards in the game that are 4 cost that you really want to put into play, honestly, especially on turn 4. Rapunzel is not something you always want to play on turn 4, or can, because you might not get the cards out of it, but it's fine. I'm giving this one 3.5. It's certainly there, and there are definitely going to be decks that want to play this on turn 4 just straight up fair, and it can be used at specific times to take Be Prepared or something else repeatably out of your opponent's hand. And the shift may come up depending on how the metagame develops and what how decks might look to help combat some of those decks. So it's fine. It's one of the better ones, but it's not amazing, but definitely room there. Next up, we have Ursula, Vanessa. So who is it? Ursula or Vanessa? Singer 4. This one's just getting a 3 stars. It's probably the best Singer 4 we've seen, but it's also just mostly a vanilla character. It lets some of the bigger songs get played out pretty easily from some of the much larger ones, like the Amber one that does double Be Our Guest. This lets it play for potentially on turn 3 if you lead with a Cinderella. Singer 4, there's not too many songs that are for 4 cost right now that we're looking at. That's one of the biggest downsides of Singer 4s, pretty much, that we've seen, is that there's nothing really to hit that note. But it's definitely a solid card. I'm going to get 3 stars because of the potential it does have with some of the bigger songs and being an Ursula for the card we just saw too. Totally fine. Bruno's Return. So instead of getting a 3/2, we pay 2 less to remove 2 damage. I'm not a fan of this. I think Hades is better in most every situation. It's not a song, so there's no benefit for potentially finding off certain things. There's part of your world, which is a song at 3, which doesn't see any play. This is probably one of our first 1.5 stars. It's not something I'm really thinking should be played, but it helps piece your Madrigals back together that get removed, but there's more effective ways to do this. So it's not thrilled. Moving on. First Aid. Remove 1 damage from each of your characters. I can't really imagine worlds where this is great. This is also the 1.5 stars, only getting the half star because it's inkable. Certain situations limited, I'm sure it comes up. I don't think this is ever going to see playing constructed. Yeah. 1.5 for that one. All right, look at this family. I'm looking. So Sing Together. Our first Sing Together card we've seen here that kind of lets you sing with more than one character. So as mentioned before, the Ursula we're looking at, the one that can sing for 4, and maybe a 1-cost Cinderella can sing this on turn 3. So it's like a Be Our Guest. You look at the top 5 instead of 4, so it sees more cards, and get 2 characters put to your hand. I'm interested to see how these all play out. They're potentially powerful, and the ones that are inkable I think are more playable than the ones that are not, just because of how expensive they can be. But it's certainly a fine card. I can definitely see this be played in some decks. I'm not certain Steel Song wants it because it's pretty heavy in the song count, and hitting 2 things might be a bit difficult at times depending on how the build is. But I think it's a solid 3-star card. Being inkable gives it a lot of room to be played in 1 or 2 of, and maybe the right deck hasn't been created, or we'll eventually build it with something that trying to piece A and B together, maybe for some kind of combo deck, sure. But yeah, we'll see. It's really hard to say what this would look like. Be Our Guest was always fine in set 1. This potentially getting you more than 1 card could be cool. I doubt anyone's going to sing a 7-cost character to play this. They're going to piece together smaller ones, but you never know. Lost in the Woods. Not great, not terrible. It's kind of very similar to the card 1 Dozen Eggs, which is a set 2 song that essentially gives your characters resist 2 for the turn, except this doesn't work against actions. 2 stars, it's not great, but this also can be used on offense in a similar way. You're just kind of challenging a bunch into theirs, and you want to get all their characters shrunk. Limited's fine. I'm not thrilled about this. I don't think it's going to be any kind of playing constructed. Each opponent may choose and discard a card. For each who doesn't, you gain 2 lore. Seems like a multiplayer card. This is getting a 1.5 stars. It's worse than a Sudden Chill. Because I think that most of the scenarios where they can discard a card, they're just going to let you discard a card, and when you want them to discard a card, they're just going to let you gain 2 lore, and you're not threatening enough on the board to make this 2 lore matter when you're playing a card like this in your deck, I don't feel. It's not completely unplayable, but it's close to it. It's not good. I don't recommend it. 1.5 stars just because, who knows? I don't think it's going to be very good. Basically 1 stars, but a little bit more than that. All right, Miracle Candle. An interesting one. So banish this item if you have 3 or more characters in play, gain 2 lore. So it's essentially 2 cost inkable. If you have 3 characters, gain 2 lore. Pretty interesting. And remove up to 2 damage from chosen location. I'm not certain with this card if you are required to have a location to use this effect. I don't believe you are with how the rules change is made. We'll have to work for the FAQ for this. I'm a little interested in this card. Amber doesn't have too many ways to kind of, gain a bunch of lore quickly, but this card could make that type of strategy relevant. I'm interested to see where this goes, and I think that there's the potential for this card to be good, especially if you don't need a location in play to activate this. I believe you don't, with how the rules have updated to where essentially using an effect, if you can play it, you do as much as you can for the card. So, which means if you can play it, you can banish this item at any point in time, but if you have 3 more characters as the condition, gain 2 lore, and remove up to 2. I don't know if you have to do this part. If you don't, then as long as you don't have to have a location in play, I'm not talking about the damage part. There can be 0 damage because it's up to, but as long as you don't have to have a location in play to use this effect, as well as the 3 characters, I think this card could be pretty good. I'm giving it 3 stars. Speculatively, it could be played a bit more. It's mainly getting points because of its inkability. Situations where you don't have it, it's just ink. There could be some type of recurring item shenanigans that go on with the set. I haven't looked at all the things too much, but I definitely have played decks that may want this type of effect, mostly Sapphire, Amber, kind of heavy ramp decks that would flavor sham this away if it's not relevant or otherwise, but it has the potential, and it's inkable. So any potential to gain lore instantly should be really looked at under a pretty quick microscope there, because this is one of the Amber's first ways to do that from nothing, essentially. The Donald Duck we looked at earlier gives +1 lore, but Amber having the ability to do it from nothing in play to play 3 1-cost characters out and then gain some could be good. So I believe you don't need the location in play, but we'll go with that for now. Yeah, solid card. Record player. One of our first cards we saw. Look at this. When you play a song, something gets shrunk, and your stitches count for +1 singer. I'm sure there's some wacky build around with this card, but I'm not really certain it's there. It requires a little bit too much for me to really be about it. This is a 2 for the potential it could have, but unlikely to be played. Inkable is the only reason it's not getting a 1. So yeah, your stitch can sing, be prepared, and you need to have a bunch of stitches in play for it to sing something bigger. Maybe I'm not seeing it though. I'm kind of off it. All right, Atlantica. Well, this is not going to work for locations, is it? My viewer here. So how am I going to do that? So Atlantica is a 1-cost. Man, I didn't do this right for locations. I should do this at the end. 1-cost, 2 to move to it, 6 willpower to stay in play. Characters that are here essentially cost +2 for singing. I'm describing it because the image is not going to work with this. I thought they'd be upright, but anyway, I'm not really a fan of this card. I'm giving it 2 because it's inkable, but even though it costs 1 to play, 2 to move things to, you're essentially investing 2 ink to move something to here, and it doesn't give any lore. And you're trying to get a song value greater than what you're playing out there. There's, of course, you can make your Ursula 3-cost sing one of the Emerald song. We don't talk about Bruno, and have that be a really big play to it. But that's essentially playing 3-cost from Ursula, hoping it survives, and then paying 3-cost again to sing a song for free. So that's a lot of investment to making it work. Not too thrilled with the idea, because you're not really getting more than you're putting into it out. You're just kind of shifting around how your ink is being used by paying to give +2 singing costs. But yeah, it's not exciting. Yeah, this is gonna be awkward for these locations. All right, the Underworld. So it's a 2 costs, 2 to move to, 6 lore. So essentially the same stats as before, but it has 1 lore on it. Save a Soul is its ability. When a character quests while here, you can pay 3 to return a character from your discard to your hand. So let's just talk about how much this costs to use. You have to pay 2 to play it, 2 to move something to it, end quest with a character that you've spent some amount of ink on, and then pay 3. So you're essentially paying 7 ink to return a character from your banished zone to your hand. And that's a lot of ink just to return a character. Now, of course, if there's ways to reduce this cost, or there's something that reduces the cost of kind of triggered abilities here. So I'm not really too sure this is going to be played. It can, in a very grindy game, be okay, but it's not something I'm really looking forward to. I'm giving this 2 stars just because at 2 for a 2, it costs 2. It's an inkable and it has a lore that's almost worth it at 6 willpower, but still gets it by Maui, and that's a little bit rough. What's going on, kitty? But yeah, that's it for Amber here. I believe that's all the cards. If I missed any, you can let me know. But we're going to move on to Amethyst here in just a minute.